We are officially less than 24 hours away from the release of J. Cole's last and final studio album titled The Fall Off. Now, as of recently on his Instagram page, J. Cole actually had released what is supposed to be the back cover to The Fall Off and also gave some insight. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things as we are so close to this album being released. Welcome back to the Voiceovers Podcast. I'm 24K Logan. So the first thing that I wanted to get into is when J. Cole was giving us hindsight of his album, or insight, if you rather, he started off saying some of the very first verses for the Come Up were written when I was just 19 years old. The title of that project, the first one that I would ever release, had a double meaning. There was the obvious one, my ambitions to come up in the rap game. The second was more subtle, my physical change of location to do so. I was a delusional teenager from Fayetteville, North Carolina, who had decided to leave home and come up to New York City on a dream-chasing mission. When you listen to that project, you hear a college kid with a real sharp pen telling the world how he's going to make it and proudly put his unknown city on the map in the process. So just breaking down that paragraph, I think that's in a way J. Cole paying some type of homage to his very first project, his very first mixtape, which was the Come Up, and him, kind of reminding us and going into detail of what was the actual purpose of the Come Up, the whole concept behind it, and, that being obviously the earliest part of his career and his attempt to make a name for himself. Now, obviously, the Come Up, along with Friday Night Lights and the Warm Up, was recently released on DSPs and streaming platforms roughly a year ago by J. Cole. Of course, those are beloved mixtapes, especially from the J. Cole fan base, including myself. And I think that is partially what we're getting in The Fall Off, is J. Cole kind of going back to his original roots, wanting to just show people or remind people of his elite pen game and kind of killing that notion that people from the South can't rap. Although years before J. Cole, we already had rappers like Andre 3000, we had Scarface, we had Lil Wayne. So there were already lyricists before J. Cole was, even a big name. But I think at the time of J. Cole releasing the Come Up, which was in 2007, there was still, for whatever reason, some type of notion that rappers from the South couldn't spit as good as rappers from the North, or whatever the case may be. And now we move forward to the third part of J. Cole's insight on the album. He stated, "The Fall Off, a double album made with intentions to be my last, brings the concept of my first project full circle." So just more confirmation right then and there that this is indeed J. Cole's last and final album. Now, as a J. Cole fan, I am a bit heartbroken, only because, I grew up with him, and, being a big fan of his music, you always want to see more of your favorite artists. But J. Cole has teased the idea of The Fall Off being his last and final studio album for a very long time. And with the type of rapper that J. Cole is, and him being somewhat of a perfectionist, it only makes sense that he wants to go out on top and go out with a bang with an undisputable classic album, which I think is something else that he is going for with The Fall Off. Then we get to where he breaks down each disc of the album, because again, it is confirmed now to be a double disc album. Disc 29 tells the story of me returning to my hometown at age 29, a decade after moving to New York, accomplishing what would have been seemed impossible to most. I was at a crossroads with the three loves of my life: my woman, my craft, and my city. So when he says returning to his hometown at the age of 29, that is around the days of 2014 Forest Hills Drive, which is believed by a lot of J. Cole fans and general hip hop fans to be J. Cole's best album to date. Now, that would tell me that Disc 29 is not only talking about the Forest Hills Drive era, but talking about the things that he was balancing during that time period outside of just the music. And that would actually make sense for him to say that he's been working on the album for a decade. It's now been 12 years since the Forest Hills Drive album was released. So we can assume that roughly around that time is when the original concept and idea of the fall off came about. Then we move on to when Cole is actually talking about the second disc of the album. He says, Disc 39 gives insight into my mindset during a similar trip home, this time as a 39-year-old man, older and a little closer to peace. So J. Cole, of course, just turned 41 years old less than a month ago, right? As a matter of fact, more like 2 weeks ago, January the 28th, of course. Now, 39-year-old man, that would be 2 years back. That was around 2024. So let's not forget, J. Cole has also recently stated that due to the events of 2024, of course, the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, that event and everything that transpired after that during that time period is what kind of inspired him to actually make the Fall Off a double disc album. So, what does all of that say? I think that it not only brings his entire story and his entire career together in one, from the time that he released the Come up until where we are now, the Fall Off, but I also think that disc 2 is strictly focusing on the current state of mind where J. Cole is at, where he was at, mentally in 2024, where he was at with music in 2024, going into where we are now early in 2026. I think that basically the entire album is making his entire career come full circle, but both discs are telling the stories of J. Cole in his life and moments of his career during two different times. Disc 29 being during the time of Forest Hills Drive. Disc 39 being from 2024 or Might Delete Later all the way to where we are now, which is the Fall Off. And that leads me into my next point. I just want to say that I think this is more confirmation that we are in for a great album, a great finale by J. Cole. I don't want to say that this is an instant classic because obviously the project has not been released yet, but I've said on this channel numerous times, and I'm going to say it again. If you tell us that you have been working on an album for 10 years, right? And you tell us that this album is supposed to tie your entire career together, make everything come full circle. I think not just as a J. Cole fan, but as a hip hop fan in general, you cannot expect nothing else but greatness from that. And because of those reasons, because of the insight that J. Cole has given us, I think that this will be a classic album. And now I want to get into the last and final paragraph of J. Cole's insight. So I'm just going to start off where he says, the front and back cover are photographs I took when I was 15. The back cover that includes the track list is a picture I took of the walls in my bedroom at the time. Thank you to every artist and photographer that cleared these pictures. I woke up every morning as a teenager, quite literally looking up to y'all. When this album releases, please know that you, in some deeper metaphysical type way, are in the music too. The Fall Off, February 6, 2026, Cole. So that's another thing that I wanted to touch up on. I do think that this is a love letter to hip hop for J. Cole. I think this is a love letter to hip hop, briefly at least. I do think that he's going to pay homage to his heroes like Nas, Eminem, Tupac, Biggie, Cannabis, Andre 3000. You might even see some of those guys featured on the album. I've predicted that there is a chance we get Eminem, maybe even Andre 3000. I know that might be a bit of a stretch. I do think it's a very strong chance that we get Nas. Nas is probably J. Cole's biggest inspiration of all time when we're talking about him as a rapper and as an artist. So it would not shock me one bit if we get Nas on this album. But not only do I think this is going to be a love letter to hip hop for J. Cole and him paying homage to his heroes growing up, I also think that, once again, this is tying everything together in his career. From the moment he started rapping as a teenager to the Come Up, to the era of Forest Hills Drive to where we are now in 2026. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We have plenty of content on the way. Let us know down in the comments what you think about J. Cole's insight that he recently gave, and let us know your final predictions for the fall off. Who do you think will be featured? Do you think it'll be any features at all? And what are your expectations for the album? Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace and love to everybody.